Thanks for tuning in. We're Ace Comicals. I have with me my co-host Rahul and Leon Everett. I'm Greg Driver. Let's get started. This is a special news bulletin. Ladies and gentlemen, I do this with a heavy heart. We regret to inform you the Doomsday Clock has struck midnight. Welcome to Ace Comicals episode 23. I have both my co-hosts today, Ray and Leon.
Alright, Greg.
Woo!
So, a lot to unpack here. It's been a really heavy couple of weeks for comics, I think. We've got the big one, which is Doomsday Clock number 1, which obviously that's what my little intro was about this time. And there's been stuff at the movies and stuff on TV as well, because Netflix have had their Punisher series out now, so that's now on Netflix, ready to watch and binge. And we've got Justice League at the cinemas. So you guys haven't watched the Punisher yet, have you? So
not yet.
No, okay, it's
Not
just
yet.
me then. I am currently only 5 episodes in, but I am enjoying it so far. I think for me, a lot of people are saying it's their favourite one of the Defenders so far. I think for me, it's like joint with Daredevil, because my favourite was Daredevil up to now.
That's pretty high praise so far.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really liking this. It's definitely one of the better ones. Punisher for me is a little bit of a dark area, because although I know who the Punisher is and what he does and everything else, so I don't have a lot of Punisher comics, so I don't know like loads about the Punisher. But what I do know about the Punisher, this is like, you know, this is doing it for me basically. So I do enjoy this show.
I mean, without jumping in any super like plot details or whatever, like what is it about the show that is working for you, that it is nearing the top of your list of the MCU or Netflix shows?
Just the way they portray Frank Castle, like the way they show his trauma and everything, because everyone knows he's a veteran, and part of what he does comes from the fact that he experienced terrible things when he went to war for his country. And it's the way that they portray that, and the way that they portray a soldier coming back changed from wherever it is he's been sent to fight on his country's behalf, and what doing the things you have to do in those situations will do to a man. I think I quite like that. I quite like the way that they show that, and the way that they show that he's not just this bullet spraying, tough as nails steel statue of a man. He's like, you know, he's got a very soft core. He's very vulnerable, in fact, in places. So.
That's pretty cool, because there is a fear that a whole show based on the Punisher become one note. Because I loved John Bernthald's performance as him in Daredevil season 2. I thought he was the best thing in that season.
Yeah.
And he was just he wasn't like a classical Punisher in terms of what I remember from the comics or the cartoon, but he was a really interesting take on it. And I think Bernthald is one of the more interesting actors of our current generation. And I think with that role, he transforms it from what could be almost a one note I just want revenge and I'll kill anyone, to quite a nuanced character.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that in season 2. So
yeah, I mean,
if he's carrying that on in the main show, then I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, 100%. The way he plays the Punisher is as much about the vengeance and the black and white sense of justice as it is about the paranoia and the fear that character experiences in being, you know, in having all these enemies, in knowing what the people that he's fighting against are capable of, and things like that, you know? Anyone that gets close to him is potentially a target, as most heroes know, but more so in the Punisher, I think. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent Punisher comics later on, which I've had on my list, which I've read off the back of this, actually. Off enjoying the show, I've thought maybe I should bone up on the Punisher, and there's been some decent releases for Punisher comics recently, so I've had a quick look at some of those. Yeah, so I mean, you guys have seen Justice League, both of you, haven't you?
We have. We saw it together.
Yeah. So, what angle do we come at this one from?
Well, okay, I don't think I've hidden my perspective and opinion on the DC universe, the cinematic universe, as it's been to date. Not been that impressed with it overall. So I went in with fairly low expectations, especially knowing that there's been some muddied history with the production of this new film, having been passed through different creative hands over the course of its production. Overall, not as disappointed as I was expecting to be, but also not as enthralled as I would have liked to have been. Where do you stand on it, Leon?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I've got mixed feelings, as similar to you, and known really well by anybody who tries to engage me on this. The DCEU,
or known to anyone who was within earshot of us after we left cinema.
But the DCEU has been mostly a disappointment for me in several ways. But the most ways is I just think there's an outright lack of understanding of the characters and the world, and it feels like a rushed attempt to try and catch up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But in each thing, there's each film, there's still interesting things going on, interesting ideas. It never seems to work together, and it hurts me to my core because it could be so good, and in some ways they're so close, and in other ways they're so far. But coming off the back of the goodwill of Wonder Woman, I was interested in what would happen with this film. And going in with such low expectations, it hits this weird spot where I've got no angle left. The fight has left me with the last two with Suicide Squad and Batman vs Superman. That the fight has left me. I don't have the passionate anger anymore because I've just resigned myself to the fate of what these movies are. But I think because of that, even despite all the weird stuff to do with the rewrites and the reshots and reshooting and some of the other issues with the film, and the fact that the tone does bounce wildly depending who wrote and directed the scene, it's not terrible. I don't hate it. It's not a great film by any stretch. In some ways, you could describe it as a bad film, and a lot of reviews have, but I can not sympathize. I can understand people who are fans of the DCEU so far enjoying this movie, because ultimately it's like a course correction of getting the dour world that was set up to begin with and mixing it with a more lighter tone that matches some of the other box office fare at the moment. So it's a muddled mess of a film, but it's not complete trash, which will be surprising coming from me. But no, there's just generally some really fun moments in the film, and some interesting action beats. It does weird things where I don't want to get into any plot details, but it gets into territory which is very close to one of my favorite comics runs of this year, and that sort of holds up the Uncanny Valley mirror to you a bit. But I'm not going to tell you to go out there and go to the cinema and see it, but I don't know. It's not the train wreck it could be.
Yeah, my feeling on it is it's less than the sum of all of its parts, which is not the way it should be. When you've got all of these great heroes coming together, it should become something bigger than all the disparate parts, but I feel like it kind of flattens towards the end, and I left feeling a bit meh, I think. Greg, what did you feel about it?
I don't know how to articulate what I feel with this film, because it's not that I hate it, but it's not that I like it either. I felt it was rushed. I feel that this whole DC cinematic universe thing could benefit from from more time. It needs to be spaced out. They need to be more thoughtful in their releases.
Have more of a lead-in.
Yeah, rather than rushing things out. I think each individual character in this film, I think the members of the Justice League that hadn't yet been introduced could have benefited from a proper introduction, maybe having their own movie.
I do feel like we're kind of tiptoeing around the idea that the hands that are molding this franchise just aren't that talented. Like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but it's just it seems a little bit sophomoric in its attempts at portraying something that could be really grand and epic and meaningful.
Yeah.
But they're just taking all the surface elements, skimming it off the top, and then just throwing what they think would be cool, as opposed to what actually works for the characters or what works for the plot.
They're taking something that, I mean, could be a lot grander than it actually is, and it's they're taking something and they're not doing it justice to a standard. They're not holding it to the standard it deserves to be held at, basically. They're just, I don't know, it's subpar, I guess, for me. It's not terrible, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's subpar. I mean, it was cool.
Yeah, and
but
that's what I was just going to say. Like, the thing is, I think it's more that there was an initial miscalculation in how to approach these characters in the 21st century, and that coupled with wanting to catch up the other studio who are making billions and billions and billions, who set up their universe in a particular way, coupled with lots of damage control with like bad reviews and like outcries online, that I think that what was already slightly shaky it has now become a bit more of a mess, because there's so many hands pulling at it and pointing it in different directions. Whereas had it even not liking the way it was created to begin with, if any of the other elements, like not being rushed or not like changing the movie last minute for various different reasons to match the tone of other things, I think we'd still have a bunch of films that I might not personally like, but they might be more interesting.
Yeah.
Because where I push back with the talent argument is that I think a lot of the people working on these films are like really talented and have done good work in the past. But I think the problem here is that the foundations and the roots were not firm, and I think they're instead of like shutting it all down and starting again, which they can't really do, instead they're trying to paper over the gaps, and in some ways they're getting away with it and it's working if things are fully divorced, like Wonder Woman, and in other ways they're not, like with this film. But I mean, it's interesting with what you were saying earlier, Greg, because I agree with you. Like, the lead-in films mean so much. Like, one of the character I think benefits the most from this movie is Wonder Woman, and because we're just coming off the back of her film, that we have a solid idea of the world she's coming from, and her like what this version of her like origin story is. That she's a fully formed character in this movie, and she's just having fun, and she's like really enjoyable to spend time with, and I think that matters a lot. Whereas I would give credit to like Gal Gadot with that, but I'd also give credit to Ezra Miller, his Flash, who is in a different movie from everyone else, but he's having fun, and the fun translates. So it's interesting. It's feeling seeing the seams of the production does hurt the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's fun to be had in it. It's just it's frustrating and disappointing because of what we could be getting right now.
Yeah, it felt disjointed, and I felt that a lot of people might watch it and end up confused.
Yeah,
because it just there was no. Although they tried to cram exposition and explanation into that film, This is why it felt rushed, because they just seemed to try and cram so much into one movie. They didn't actually end up explaining anything coherently or very well. And I think people might watch it and come away confused. And I mean, I there were parts where I was thinking, when I was watching it, I was thinking, wait a second, can we just double back? Can I watch that again? Because I don't understand where that ties to this and things like that. But I mean, I put it together in my head in the end, but it's just not, I just don't think it's, I just don't think it was very well thought through. I think, like I said, it would benefit from lead-ins. Like I said, I think if there was I don't think it would have had such a bad reception if there had been enough lead-in and maybe a couple more films before it. So they could have done an Aquaman film and a Flash film,
which are coming after.
Yeah, they should have come before, really. Or even, a Cyborg film would have been good to come before this. But no.
You just got to watch them in a different order then.
Yeah, exactly.
When they all come out, if they come out, looking at the box office, you just got to watch them in different order. And watch Justice League last.
Oh, DC. Anyway, so I mean, where DC seemed to be dropping the ball slightly cinematically, I think they're actually doing all right comics-wise, guys. Because this is where we start talking about what we've been reading, and as I've already mentioned and alluded to with the intro to this episode, we're going to talk about the Doomsday Clock #1, which as of recording this came out yesterday, because we are recording this on the 23rd of November, which is the day after New Comic Day. So Doomsday Clock #1, which is Geoff Johns and Gary Frank on art duties. Now this is a direct sequel, or reads like a direct sequel to Watchmen, which, if you guys know, Watchmen is the 1986 book, 86-87 book by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and that book was heavily influential in sort of redefining the superhero genre, and also took a wry look at the superhero genre, and at the same time it was a scathing snapshot of how the world was. It was like a total deconstruction of comics as they were, and it helped to sort of reshape and give us the comics that we know today, because a lot of the comics we read today were influenced, and a lot of the writers and artists that we see today were shaped by this book. So guys, I mean, initial impressions from you guys about this.
Yeah, so I didn't really know much about this going in, which I feel like is my catchphrase every 2 weeks. But you brought me onto this literally just the day before it came out. I didn't really realize it was a thing. One thing I wanted to ask you was, there have been other Watchmen-centric comics, correct?
There have, yes.
Right. And does this tie into any of those? Because I've basically avoided them, thinking, with my mindset being that I don't really want to have a half-assed attempt at continuing the Watchmen universe and have it ruin what I love already, if that makes sense.
No, I mean,
which I don't know if that's a very... I think that's kind of close-minded on my part, and I'll get to that in a moment, because I actually did quite enjoy Doomsday Clock #1. But I want to know if it's worth me going back to the other Watchmen comics just to see what the deal is.
No, I avoided them at the time. I didn't... I think they were supposed to be prequels, weren't they?
That's what I got. It was before Watchmen, or so. I honestly didn't follow it that well.
I think they were supposed to be Watchmen comics, so like a prequel series.
Fair enough.
But
I mean, needless to say,
because I avoided them as well. To be honest, I didn't watch them as well, because at the time I was in the mindset that Watchmen shouldn't be touched.
And then, so I went into the comic book shop not expecting to pick this up, because we'd already had a quick discussion about this beforehand, where you went to the shop in the morning and said, I had to buy the lenticular Rorschach cover. And I was like, Greg, falling for the lenticular cover, sucker. And then I walked in and I saw it, and it was on my pile without me even realizing it. I was paying for it, and I was like, oh yeah, I picked that up as well. I didn't realize. So I took it home, and I actually, there's something about there's a reverence to the original Watchmen, which I didn't expect from this. it really does feel like, if not spiritually in the same vein, it does feel like it's trying really hard to be a continuation. It doesn't take any huge left turns to places that make you feel like it's straying from the source material. And it tells a fairly simple story, because it has to, in that it's setting up this new arc that we're going to get for, I think, 12 issues. So not a lot happens, but there's a lot of, I don't know, it does that great thing where when you have 12 issues, when you have this amount of time to grow a story that's based on something that's really highly revered, like it does, it picks out all the things that you remember and then embellishes on them. It doesn't detract from your memory. Yeah. And I'm really keen to see where this goes, and that was so unexpected for me.
No, yeah, I mean, the older I get, the more comics I read, the more this feeling of Watchmen should be left alone fades for me. So whereas I didn't touch these other Watchmen comics, I don't know much about them. I think they were supposed to be prequels, but don't quote me on that. This, to me, is, the original Watchmen, as we've said, it's a high art. It's a scathing snapshot of how the world was and a deconstruction of the superhero genre, as I've already explained. But, who's to say this can't be updated to reflect today's world? And I think that is what this book is going to do. And I think as an introduction and a barometer of things to come, I think that's where we're going with this. Especially with some of the news reports we're seeing in the beginning of the book and the way it seems to be panning out. I mean, the opening chapter, definitely, as an opening chapter, this is definitely holding a mirror to the modern world. And we know that it's been proven time and time again that the superhero genre and comics in general are excellent hosts for satire and commentary. So, and this is doing it very well, and I think this carries the spirit of the original Watchmen very well, in the way that it opens and the way that this particular issue reads.
It's a weird creation, isn't it? Because I mean, with this we should be talking about Geoff Johns and how after New 52 he ushered in the new DC Rebirth era, which all the comics are currently on, aren't they? And he kicked that off with the bumper issue DC Rebirth, which was the story of the Flash, one of the Flashes, coming back and seeing the world, the New 52 world, and being like, where's all the colour gone? Where's all the fun? Why is this place so morose and depressed? And one by one, he goes from character to character, and there's some interesting revelations / allusions to Watchmen that I believe was followed up with, or more hints are made in is it Batman Flash the Button? I've not read that yet.
Yeah, it's you've got Rebirth, then you've got the Button.
Yeah.
Then you've got Superman Reborn. Oh no, wait, no, well? It goes Rebirth, then Superman Reborn, then the Button, then the Oz Effect, then Doomsday Clock.
And so that sort of setup into this, now what was alluded to before seems to be exactly what they were going for. And all year I've been seeing countdown to so I follow a lot of the DC writers on Twitter, and I just skim over it because I'm like, oh, what is this Watchmen crap? And they've just talked about it for months, because I think there was probably a short run of countdown to Doomsday Clock, as you always have before these events. And I was whatever. And then as it was nearing release earlier this week, I thought, oh man, the actual thing's coming out. It's Geoff Johns again running it. I mean, this is Geoff Johns. This is the guy who's basically running DC Comics at the moment. And he's got his finger in every pie. He's the co-runner. He's trying to right the ship of the DCEU, the cinematic universe. This is the guy. This is the guy who in DC Rebirth there's veiled sort of jabs at Snyder's interpretation of the DC universe in the films.
Yeah.
So that's what made me think, oh screw it, let me check this out, because you know me, I'm just not a fan of big event stories anymore. I'm too old for this, and I hate all the tertiary comics you need to read as part of it. So for this, I'm just going to read this 12. Might go back to the button, but yeah, reading this, it was very like the first page is so striking. It has that classic panel layout that we know and love, but it's set. Is it 92? So it's like we're seeing like the aftermath of what happened at the end of the Watchmen comic. But the way it's done, there's so many like relevant buzzwords to politics today and how things are very polarized between like both sides, if you want to put it that way. And you see a lot of words like because the first panels you're reading are the like sort of the inner monologues / diary entries of a character who's quite nihilistic, and there's like mention of undeplorables and echo chambers, and there's posters of "Make America Safe Again," and there's like in reference to the president, there's like no statements come out, and there's an image of a golf club,
news reports of the European Union collapsing.
Yeah, and like the Mexican Wall, Americans are flooding into Mexico, who knocked it down, and there's lots of like little things in there where you can feel like Geoff Johns. I mean, it seems like he's trying to bridge the gap between these two things, and like you say in updating, for me it seems more of a case of using the Watchmen framework and applying it to the conversation now.
This is what I was trying to say, that it's like using the Watchmen mirror, so to speak, and holding that mirror up to the modern world, because that's what I view Watchmen as. It is a mirror that you can hold to something to show it its true self.
But yeah, like it seems to have quite a common eye on sort of what the current socio-political landscape is, definitely in America, but I think in parts of the wider world as well. And I wasn't expecting such overt politicism like on the first page. So it's definitely striking. I mean, you could argue in some facets that it's just sitting in the middle, not really picking the thing. But considering the character who's saying this, it makes a lot of sense. So I think it was very strong lead-in, and there's a lot of like interesting themes going on. There's a lot of like religious verbiage. Like there's a lot of talk of God's plan and referring to characters as God, and things sort of being like almost preordained, and I don't know, it's intrigued me for these 12 issues. So unless next month's issue is complete garbage, I think I'm gonna sit on this Doomsday train and see where it goes. I think the Gary Frank's art is really cool. I don't know, in some ways it reminds me of Gibbons' art, but it doesn't feel like it's aping it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, yeah, he kind of tries to step into those shoes, and I think he fills them quite well, without just straight ripping Gibbons off, basically, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty cool. I think the Brad Anderson's colours are really cool, and I like his alt cover. Like, it's a weird one because I still have that feeling of it feels exploitative in a way, because making a sequel or carrying on the story of Watchmen and whatever thing, it feels like sacrilege, but even forgetting that, it feels a bit opportunistic, like bringing the world of Watchmen into the main world of DC. So I'm just hoping that by doing this, they're using the Watchmen universe to say and do some really interesting things in these 12 issues. So I'm on board for now. I still think shouldn't touch Watchmen, but I'm sort of treating it like it's an Elseworlds non-canon side story where they can do what they want, like an Old Man Logan type thing. So yeah. I'm interested in seeing where they go with this. And yeah, like from what I've read of like Geoff Johns over the years, I am a fan of what he's doing, and I can see how he sort of got to the top with DC. So yeah, I'm willing to follow his lead and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this first issue, and as has already been mentioned, that lenticular cover is beautiful. But I know that somewhere, wherever Alan Moore is, there is colourful language to follow when he sees that. If he's seen that.
Do you think he even cares now?
I don't know.
Do you think he's given up that fight now? He just doesn't care. I mean, they made a movie about it that had hyper-violent fighting and stuff and action scenes. Like, do you think he's just divorced from it all and doesn't care? Or do you think he's just like brewing up a spell?
I think he's just I think he's sitting there just, impotent rage or whatever. Maybe there's a bonfire going in his back garden, maybe he's swearing at the bonfire, I don't know. But I think wherever he is, I don't think he's happy with it. But I mean, what can you do? I like it. I like this cover. I like what they're doing with it. And so I mean, as an opening chapter, I think this is great, and I love where it's going so far. I like that it's I guess my conclusions are that it's a tribute, but it also isn't afraid to tread new ground and continue what the original Watchmen started, I guess, in the way that it's looking at the superhero genre. It sets up something grand and intriguing, and I'm hyped for issue 2. So we'll see where that one goes. On from there, these are the so as I mentioned before, I've been reading some Punisher comics. I've been picking up Punisher, the Platoon, which is a new Punisher release. We're up to issue 3 now, and this is Garth Ennis and Goran Pavlov on art duties, with Geordie Belair doing the colours. Now this is the story of Frank Castle's first military tour. So the first, and this is the first time he took a life, basically. That's in these books. The moments that shaped him, basically, and the things that he never really left behind when he came home from Vietnam, because this is Frank Castle in Vietnam. The whole premise of this that I'm getting so far is that he's always had a natural talent and a predisposition for violence and for battle. So it's like there's always been something there with this guy, that he's a natural for it. This is just what he does, basically. Although he's supposedly inexperienced and has no combat experience, when he gets to the battlefield at the start of issue 1, the soldiers that he is in command of have realised that he, okay, this guy, he doesn't have any experience, but he knows already. And it's the format of the story as if it's told by the men he served alongside in Vietnam, so his first command. So these people were under his command. These guys are sitting around a table in a bar, and they're doing an interview with a writer who wants to write a book about Frank Castle's first tour, a writer who has written another book about Frank Castle already. And this is all done from the point of view of the writer. So when we're viewing through panels and we're seeing the actual when we're seeing these veterans as they are supposedly today, sitting around a table in a bar as old men, we're seeing this from the writer's point of view. So we're looking through the writer's eyes from their perspective at, like these 4 guys sitting opposite us at a table drinking as they're talking, which I think is pretty cool. I love that panel layout. And I love that we never really see the writer's face, like as if we are the writer the whole time, kind of thing. And it sort of like flips between the bar and flashbacks to Vietnam. The art in this book is beautiful. Goran Pavlov does an excellent job with facial expressions and the way that he manages to put across emotion in some of these faces as well, because a lot of this, as I said, being panels in a bar, and being a conversation around a table from somebody else's perspective, a lot of this is focused on facial expressions and, you know, like small movements with hands and things like that when people are talking. And I think Goran Pavlov does a very good job of that.
That's really cool. Like, always find when you see those like intimate details or sort of closer, more nuanced movements, it's something that gets lost, I think, in like comics and like cartoons, like in animation. And I always find it really cool and refreshing when you do actually see them in those mediums.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they do like a panel by panel, bow by bow of someone's hand moving, but you know, like when you look between two panels, you get the impression that someone's hand might be making a motion as he's talking and things like that, because you can see it. And I think that's pretty cool. It's a war story. It takes you through his first tour of Vietnam, and like I said, it just basically charts his first kill and his supposed predisposition to violence and to you know, efficiency on the battlefield and the way the Punisher behaves. So, you know, he's like supposedly the ultimate killing machine. He's very adept with guns and weapons and knows exactly what he's doing. Like he does what he does to survive. He has a job, and he's very driven, and he gets that job done no matter what he has to do to get that job done. And that is what the impression we're getting in this story. And it's very nice to sort of see his beginnings. Like, this is kind of his origin before his origin kind of thing. We've also got, running through this book as well, we get to see things from the Viet Cong side of things. So the Viet Cong being the opposite side of things in the Vietnam War, we get to see things from their point of view. And there's a part in the book where the writer goes as far as saying, well, actually, you know, I've interviewed a surviving general who fought against you guys and fought against Frank Castle. I've already got his side of things, you know. And from going from being this general in the war to now being this sort of like gentle old man who he likes America, according to what he says about it, and according to the writer, you know, I know this guy loves America. He's been here a few times since the war ended, kind of thing, you know. So it gets that kind of side of things as well, and it feels like, you know, like you get these documentaries, and there's this whole sense of that even when people are fighting a war, they're fighting for their country, but after that war, you know, they're just people. They don't actually hate what they're fighting against. They're doing it because they're told to, because they're following orders, kind of thing, if you understand where I'm coming from with that. Like you get a sense of kind of a feeling of what it might be to be a soldier, because you're going to war and you're doing it because you're told to, and you know, there's no, it's not personal on the battlefield, I guess. I think is the point they're trying to get across, you know. I don't think it's a I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying this so far, and as a Punisher story, it's really good. And as I said, this is something I started reading off the back of watching the Netflix show, so I'm really enjoying this. That is a good 3 issues. Next on my list is Kill the Minotaur, because that is now finished. So I can talk about how I thought about all 6 together. So, like, especially in this last issue as well, very David Cronenberg. The whole thing's been very David Cronenberg. I've really enjoyed this series as a fresh take on an age-old tale. I mean, I like the Labyrinth, the fact that in this the Labyrinth is actually alive, and while it's working with the Minotaur, it's also working against the Minotaur. And the whole origin of this living labyrinth thing and this Minotaur creature that runs through these books, because I have talked about it on previous episodes of Ace Comicals. He's like, it came from the sky, but is it extraterrestrial? Is it divine? We don't know. There's so many influences within this story and facets of different genres. You've got horror, historical action, sci-fi, fantasy, all rolled into one book. And when the trade comes out, I'd say, guys, buy the trade, because this book is brilliant. I mean, the artwork itself it's absolutely gorgeous, and we have Lucas Kettner and Jean-Francois Bolio to thank for that. I mean, the covers have been brilliant on this as well, like really intricate, really sort of like disgusting monster designs, and as I said, really Cronenberg-esque with its like, so, you know, like this kind of like biological mess of bits and pieces and limbs and organs and things and everything on the outside kind of thing. So everything looks raw and untamed and just like you've opened something up and turned it inside out, like it should be bleeding constantly. everything looks very alive and very biological and very body
horror.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting from the way the labyrinth looks in this as well. It's all like the thing has a skeleton almost, you know, bones and stuff like that. And it's very bloody and it's very, very cool and very even like, you know, you get a sense of the I don't know, it's just prevalent throughout it, like the way they've done the historical stuff in it. But you get a sense that they've really sort of looked into this and done their research, and at the same time they've also taken influences from great modern stories and great modern films and modern genres and really packed it together into one heavy, devastating punch of a 6-issue series. I really enjoyed that one, and I think did you ever read any of it, Ray? Because I don't know if you said you read issue 1 or...
No, I didn't, but I do have a colleague who's been picking them up month by month, and she seems to be a big fan. She agrees with what you said about it, taking historical references and then just slightly riffing on them with modern ideals, and I think that really appealed to her. So anyone else who has that kind of desire for something which, you know, is steeped in ancient mythology but brought to modern standards, I think, yeah, it sounds like it would appeal to
we will be seeing the trade soon.
Yeah, so. And it's one that I've been waiting for the trade to come out to actually catch it in full, because I missed the beginning of the run. I think if I'd have caught the first one, then I would have continued with it, because I flipped through my friends, and it does look really interesting. But I'm looking forward to the trade coming out.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. On from there, I'm at the end of my list. It's another one from me for the Dark Nights Metal event, which I seem to be, every time we do a cast at the moment, I'm picking one of these out.
Is this the one?
This is the one
I've been waiting for.
This is the one. This is the Batman Who Laughs. So this is the Dark Nights Metal, the Batman Who Laughs. And first of all, the cover is this kind of Hellraiser, Cenobite-ish Batman design with this huge smile. He's like nothing but a smile, and part of the Batman cowl and some spikes and some leather and some chains and some crazy Jokerized Robins on chains. Now, this again is another twisted tale of a Batman who should not be, but this one really should not be. This explores the idea of the fact that, you know how Batman is always prepared for everything and has a plan to beat everyone and has a way around most people's powers and things like that. Well, what if he was compromised in some way? He would become the most dangerous man in the universe, and I think that's what we're seeing here. He's basically the whole idea of this is the Joker has gone too far, way too far, and he's pushed Batman over the brink, and Batman breaks his one golden rule and finally kills the Joker. That's his bad decision in this book, and from there, this is where things start to spiral down, and it charts his slow descent into madness. And this is like something to do with a failsafe that the Joker had in place, which I'm not going to spoil for you, but it's pretty cool the way this pans out and the way that they've written that in there. You've got just a really uncomfortable read of Batman slowly falling into the abyss and doing uncomfortable and horrible things to his friends, his colleagues, his family. You know, it's just so it's I mean, it even says at the start of the book, if you're looking for, you know, the usual sort of the way the usual thing will play out, this is not it. It is wrong, and it is supposed to be wrong, and it feels wrong to read it. But I thought it was really good, and a really good sort of deconstruction of what would happen if the Joker kind of got his way, and his master plan of creating something that is the best of him and the best of the Batman, and combining those into one thing, one horrible, violent, cold, calculating, unstoppable force. On this one, we've got art by Riley Rossmo. The cover itself is by Jason Fabok, and it is written by James T. Tinian IV. I enjoyed this start to finish. The artwork is really good, actually. I really like the art style in this book. I like the way it's done. I like the way they draw the Joker in the beginning of this book. I like that it's got like this sort of like cartoon edge to it, but at the same time it's nasty, you know. Like they get the violence across, and it's like really graphic, but at the same time really cartoony, which I really enjoy about this. The way they, like, the facial expressions and everything are exaggerated and cartoonish, but it's very graphic. And the features of the characters as well. It's uncomfortable, but it's meant to be. It's a horror story, and I think that's probably one of the better entries into this Dark Knight's Metal event so far.
Yeah, how have you felt about the run as a whole so far?
The run as a whole so far, I've been really impressed with. I'm liking all these different views of Batman that we've been given, these different kind of looks into these like dark multiverses, into these different kind of like sort of snapshots of the dark multiverse we've been getting. And I like what it's setting up and where it's going for the sort of like the closing of the event, which, I mean, there's only a few issues of it left now, I think, before it's all done. And we get at the end of this one, we get that basically there's nightmare versions of other familiar figures in the DC universe that are ready to invade from the dark multiverse. And it's like every nightmare that the multiverse has ever had, that like the normal DC multiverse, every nightmare that multiverse has ever had is made manifest in the dark multiverse, and all of it is like baying at the gates, ready to come. So we're going to get like a big battle at the end, and we're going to get to see nightmarish versions of other familiar characters. But no, yeah. So far, I'm really into this book so far. Really into this run so far. Definitely 100%. So yeah. No, that was Dark Knight's Metal, The Batman Who Laughs. Yeah, no, that is a good entry into the event, definitely. And I'm really enjoying it so far. And I think when the trade comes out, obviously you guys are going to pick it up and read it, which you should.
Yeah, it's something that I've been holding out on, because it's either an idea that will fly or an idea that will fail miserably. So I've been waiting to see how things have come out, but it sounds like they've nailed a lot of the concepts so far from what you've said. So I'm interested in checking it out when everything's there available for me.
No, definitely. Two things I've been really impressed with from DC this year is that Dark Knight's Metal event and Mr. Miracle. So DC, like I said, DC are doing well this year with Mr. Miracle. We've got some really cool Batman comics, and we've got Doomsday Clock now as well. So yeah, no, I've been definitely been impressed with DC overall this year. So I guess we move on to your list now, Leon.
Yes, Greg. Could I interest you in a Minky Woodcock?
What's a Minky Woodcock?
A Minky Woodcock is a new comic written by and art done by Cynthia von Berler, I want to say. And what it is, pretty much, is a 1920s set sort of detective story / film noir feeling type story.
Okay.
About a woman who works for her father's sort of private detective agency. And while he is away, a very famous author comes by wanting his help, his assistance, but he's not around. So, and Minky's very much wanting to prove herself and be one of the big guns, and like jump in and have her first mission, I should say, or whatever. So she offers to follow said author and go down this weird, the beginning of this rabbit hole that we can only assume is going to end up with Houdini. The full title, Minky Woodcock, and I believe this will be the title of this run, is the Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini. And yes, it's quite an interesting book. I mean, I think Rahul's the one who found this, and he linked it in the Ace Comicals chat, and we were like, what? The title sounds like filth, and I think part of that is just inspired because there's a history of like sort of cool or interesting like femme fatale type characters, or characters in general who have just like weird names from that era that sometimes feel like innuendo. But this book is quite interesting. I mean, I do love a good detective story, and there's a lot of shout outs to various authors like Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle. And yeah, it feels like the author's very much aware of like the lineage of these, and has created this world which is like lived in and sort of like a romantic take on it, but it's very much, it's hard to describe the art because it has that sort of pop art type feel, but done in an older style. So characters look more realistic than normal, like their expressions almost like they're rotoscoped, but not in that high facial detail way that you get in some other comics. So it's like this nice sort of middle ground of like a lot of like stark like block colors in some ways, but then the way like the clothes and the hair is done, it's like a really cool use of like the digital art. And it's different from what you're seeing in a lot of the other comics that you've been reading recently. So I've been enjoying that, and I have to give a shout out to the letterer as well, Simon Berland, because the comic does start off with the main character like using a typewriter and like typing up an entry, and I think the way how the different bubbles are used, and the way how the typeface is done and changes, and even the art style kind of changes from bit to bit as we progress through the comic. I think it's quite cool, and it's a really weird story. Like this is probably not. I wouldn't recommend reading this on the bus or train into work because it gets a bit
spicy,
weird and spicy. Risque, yeah. Maybe a bit of raunch, but not in any particular sleazy way. Just in a quite a weird naturalistic way, and. Yeah, the story takes some early turns, and then it ends in quite a not abrupt way, but it ends in sort of like a jump cut, which at first I was like, but I guess it works as a dramatic device. So I'm interested to see what happens going forward, and I'm hoping this is the cool noirish detective story set in the underbelly. With all these weird sort of famous celebrities that I didn't know that I wanted. But it's cool, and like it has like 6 covers or something, and like at least 4 of those are wildly sexy in weird ways. So like there's definite like cool intent going on here, and it's nice to sort of see something a bit different and sort of a reverse of the detective femme fatale trope in some ways. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. And just when you're reading it, watch out for that seance sequence.
I do like the artwork in this. It feels very of the time that it is supposed to be depicting. So, when you see sort of old advertising, and the way they draw people with like bold lines, not so much detail, but then the colours, like the pastel colour, colours are very sort of nuanced. And I mean, you've got like the bright pop colours as well, but like when they do skin tone and when they do like the blush on the cheeks and things like that.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but it's very like 1920s advertising, I think. Like I can imagine like an absinthe poster or something. Well, an absinthe, like like a metal.
Oh yeah, you've nailed it.
Yeah.
Like a poster or like the icon that would be on the actual packaging of whatever the thing is.
Yeah, but more I'm thinking the kind of like metal plate etching type things they hang behind bars. So it would be printed onto like a tin plate or whatever, and it would be that kind of style of art where it's like embossed
like
and then
painted.
alleyway.
Yeah, near the back door to like a speakeasy.
Yeah, embossed and then painted kind of thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the kind of thing you'd find on like a snake oil tonic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, apart from the implied smut of the title, the thing that first caught my eye was actually the first cover, because it has this really cool watercolor style with Minky Woodcock in profile, but it attached on top, like so over this watercolor wash, it has what looks like newspaper cuttings from a newspaper that was describing Houdini, or an advert for Houdini as the world's most famous magician, and I just thought that was really cool. That's what grabbed my attention. And it's odd that, like, the turn it takes, we're not really sure what this has to do with Houdini, at least for the majority of the comic. And I wonder if all these, literary celebrities that we get in this first issue, I wonder if they're going to keep coming up in following issues, or if it's just an excuse plot to bring in someone like Houdini, or just a way to set the tone. But either way, I really liked what this one was doing. And I'll
because it could sort of be like a Midnight in Paris, the Woody Allen film, where Owen Wilson's in Paris and he's randomly getting transported back in time, and people like F. Scott Fitzgerald are about, and it could be like Von Buller as like way to sort of mess around with that and interact with all these people and sort of make a comment on those times and like celebrity then and now. So it could be cool.
It feels like a less risque version of this could be something like a left of field cinema release or something, like a Wes Anderson style thing.
Yeah, and it's very romantic in that all of these, again, celebrities of the time are all involved in this one story in one go. It does have that noir feel where everything's interconnected.
Yeah. But no, I read issue 1. I enjoyed issue 1. It was pretty good. I mean, I'm not usually... I don't know. I read detective stories, but I read different kinds of detective stories. Because Batman stories are detective stories.
What you're saying is Batman.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, it's not something that I would have chosen off the shelf myself without you two telling me.
Yeah, I mean, it's my surprise hit of the week, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, pleasantly surprised by this.
No, yeah, I was surprised when I read it. I think it's pretty good.
What I'll talk about next, I won't go into too much detail because Rahul covered it last week, which is the Beautiful Death by Mathieu Bablé. I'm going to say Bablé.
Sweet.
And the lettering, he did the writing and art, and the letters were done by Kat Connery. I bring that up because I think the lettering's pretty cool in this as well. But like following on from what Rahul said, I agree with all those points. I would say that especially the sort of changing seasons point that you made last time, which you mentioned, like The Last of Us in the same breath. And I definitely got that feeling as well, and I thought it handled a lot of things really well. Like, I like the sort of cold open, if you can call it that, in a comic, where it's this character just sitting on the roof of a building, just looking out, and like immediately you just get the feeling. I mean, there's some dialogue or words that are written before building up, but you just get this feeling of like time has passed. It's just like, it's not like the events happened like last week. Like time has happened, and like the silence of like the city is deafening, and like I've just taken back by like how detailed the panels are. Like the line art is just so lovely. Like gives a lot of depth and like scale to the locations, and as characters traverse like the space they're in, it does feel very tangible, but also like very cold. And like every panel, I'm just like, whoa! Like, how is this person doing this? Like, how much time is this taken? Like, some of like, and it's like there's not sort of cheating of like fog or haze or whatever. It's just like you can see all these buildings, all these windows, all these fire escapes, all these like outside like steps, and all these different levels, these vehicles that are abandoned and crashed. And it's like there's such a dense level of detail there, and I've just got to admire it because it looks really, really cool. And the art style reminds me of like older like French sci-fi, which I thought was pretty cool. And like some of the framing and like some of the long shots, like they convey not just the scale, but they also convey like you can feel the loss that people are feeling in this. And it's a really good comic for that sort of battles against our current generation, where we're like min-maxing what we eat or consume creatively or like media-wise. And I know that there are people who like read manga chapters in 5 minutes because they're just bouncing from each word and each text box and each onomatopoeia. But I've always been really slow in reading comics because I like to breathe in every panel, and I think this is a comic that demands it.
Yeah,
and you'd be doing yourself a disservice as well as the artist, because there's just so much like cool detail in there, but it all informs the like it's all texture for the story, and it builds the atmosphere, and you can almost hear the echo as you're reading like dialogue boxes. It's one that you just really need to drink in, and like even like wordless panels, the way actions and movement is portrayed, and time it's really interesting, and it's definitely something that I've gelled with. I just love the way it captures like this cold ennui, like just this almost inevitability of like waiting to die.
Yeah,
and like it's like you have emptiness, you have melancholy, you have that weird feeling of chasing ghosts and like things out of the corner of your eye, and what like I don't know, just entertaining yourself in weird ways. And I think it handles that really well. I've only read the first issue, but I think luckily I've got 2 more or 3 more issues waiting for me. But
there's 2
like,
more because there's 3 at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. From what I've read so far, it's definitely a good recommendation. I'm looking forward to reading more.
No, I've actually read through issue 1 now as well, and I agree with every single thing you've said. No, I really enjoy this. I really enjoy the artwork, and I've always been an advocate of taking your time over reading a comic. Comic isn't something that you can just... I mean, people will do it in 5 minutes or whatever, but it's not something you should do in 5 minutes, because there's a reason people put so much effort into the art especially in like independently produced stuff, and it's really good to just sort of sit and appreciate each panel and each page and take it as a whole, and just to kind of see how it flows from one panel to another, and how each movement is translated, and how each, especially with this book as well, like how it transition between panels, like it's very seamless.
It's all very well considered.
It is,
like,
yes.
You can tell that he sat down and really thought about how the flow of the page works.
Yeah.
Which, when you read something like this, you realize how surprisingly rare that is.
Because I think it, to a degree, everyone considers it, because it's something that you definitely, obviously, you have to take it into account when you're making a comic, like how the page will flow, and how you how you're going to convey your message and your story. But this, I think, you can actually see that it's a labour of love in the way that he's done it.
I think we've made this comparison before between, say, art house movies and, you know, your general Hollywood fare.
Yeah.
And I think this is another one of those where it has just that extra step of consideration and care in the same way that an artistic director may plan out their framing a little bit more thoroughly than somebody who's just making a standard Hollywood action flick.
Yeah,
that's the thing I'm getting from this, and it's really I don't know, it's joyful to read through something that's this passionately made, I think. One thing I did want to point out about this was I was talking to one of the ladies who works in my local comic book shop, and she pointed out that it originally came out in France in May of 2011. So it's a surprisingly old comic.
So it's taken that long to get it over here, to get a wide release for it.
Yeah, and I picked it up just on the strength of knowing that Brandon Graham did the did the cover for issue number 1 of the English re-release. I don't know if you guys felt the same way as me about that, where I picked it up because I like Brandon Graham. I really like some of the stuff he's done in the past, but I think that the cover he did for this comic betrays how detailed and how beautiful the panels within the comic are. I think his cover is just a little bit more flat than what you find inside, and I think it's a little bit of a shame, in fact, to have his slightly more stark artwork on, to covering up Mathieu's really detailed painterly style.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
No, I I actually agree with you. The cover itself is very minimalist, whereas when you open the book and you start to flick through some of the pages, I mean, the amount of detail and the amount of just lines depicting cracks on walls, lines depicting expression on people's faces, lines depicting when you sit on a chair and the upholstery kind of sinks inward, anything, it's compared to the cover, it's just so much more, and it does I think it does sort of betray what's inside it, definitely. But then again, you shouldn't judge books by the cover, should you?
No, you shouldn't. Unless the cover is done by one of your favourite artists, in which case pick it up and then be pleasantly surprised by what's inside.
Yes. No, I really enjoyed issue 1, and I like this whole, like, the hopelessness kind of thing that these people seem to, they're trying to hold on to hope, but it's getting tougher and tougher, because obviously what's left, what is there? This isn't your standard apocalypse as you described last time. It's the infrastructure's still there, it's just the people aren't.
Well, I'm glad you guys are vibing with it.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to carry on with it.
No, I'm in with it, definitely. Yeah, so Leon, anything else left on your list?
Yeah, I've got one more thing that I'll speak about today. I won't go too far into it because it's quite short, but it's worth a read. Comic called Your Black Friend, and it's by it's written and the art's done by Ben Passmore. And the best way to describe it really is as a, say, very direct and intimate long-form poem, focused on the complexities and contradictions of trying to like navigate the world while being black, and the nuances of that, and the complexities. I've said that already, but it really is. It really does like dig into that, but without being like a 10,000 word essay. So yeah, it really is like, it's really short. It's about 11 pages, and I think it started life online as like a webcomic that the writer artist wanted to put up, and then they made it into a they got it released in print form, and gave it a nice color job, and yeah, it looks great. I mean, it's super independent feeling, and it was one of those ones where when you buy it, you get that feeling that the money is going directly into the creator's hands. But yeah, I mean, I'd heard this mentioned. Can't remember where, but I'd read this mentioned somewhere while I was doing research on another comic book, and I thought, okay, let me give this a shot. It wasn't available on like Comixology or anything like that, so I looked on Amazon, saw it. It doesn't cost too much, and I knew how short it was, but I thought, yeah, well, let me give this a go. I mean, I've not been buying much physical stuff recently, so let me give this a go. And it's an interesting read. I think the physical version came out in the US late last year, and then it came out over here earlier in the year. So I've had it for a while. I just haven't got around to reading it. But yeah, no, it's cool because it handles normal sort of microaggressions that I can identify with, and it presents them in not an overtly comic way, but in some ways comic, and like not really hyperbolized, but more sort of broad in some ways. And I quite like that. I like how subjective it is, and how it's not this big teaching element. I mean, the way it's presented is a lot of the panels start with like with the phrase "your black friend," and it's it's like faux instructional, by giving like anecdotes to things that people of color, especially black in the US, have to deal with, and all the triple thinking you have to do in certain situations, especially with your proximity to white people, and the sort of casual, offhand racism that you experience there, but also the blowback from that you get from other black people. So it's quite in the smaller number of pages, it hits a lot of issues quite well, I think, and it's such a quick read, and I think it's a nice, in some ways, for some people it'd be an interesting introduction to that, because I know there's a lot of people who don't even consider these things, and it'd be an interesting read without like pointing the finger at and being accusatory. But there's a lot of truth there, and there's a lot of there that I can like gel with and vibe with. I really like. I think it's on the first page. There's a woman best described as a eat, pray, love woman, and she's talking about her calling the police on this guy that she thought looked dodgy, and her descriptors are so interesting because she just says, I think it was just some like black guy with like dreads and blah blah. And then when she mentions the vehicle, she goes into granular detail. And when you play those off against the descriptors, it shows you how that those sort of biases and stereotypes are like super common. But then the mega issue there is that people don't really confront this stuff when they hear it, because nobody wants to cause a scene. Nobody wants to have an awkward moment. And I've definitely been there on the side of that as being the person who is like the target or target adjacent, and also the person who's been in a situation where they should have spoken up about something else. And it's just like, I don't think people often consider the mind fuck you get from being a person of color in like very white cultures, and there's often default passive things that people who proclaim to be allies say and do, and the over comfortability of certain words and actions that you have to contend with as well. And I think it's super effective in doing this in such a small space of time. I would definitely recommend it. It's like highly inspired by the works of Frantz Fanon, especially Black Skin, White Mask from the 50s, which was mostly about the psychological effects of colonization on black people. I would definitely give it a read. I mean, it's harder to get. You'd have to like buy the physical version, but I don't know. It's not too bad, and it's not as preachy as you may feel from the title or the topic. But I know with some of these things, you're either in with this stuff, like, oh, you want to read about all these type of things, or you just keep it away from me. And I think I think with various different topics, we should be trying to lessen the keep it away from me, and at least trying to engage in stuff that we're not always as comfortable with. But yeah, that's my take.
This 100% sounds like something I would want to pick up. And to your point, I think the title "Your Black Friend" immediately sounds less confrontational than, say, something like "Dear White People." So I think I'd pick this up. Anything that gives me a new perspective on something that I may never have known to even begin to consider, you know. So yeah, I think I'll be checking this out, especially because it's so easy to pick up off Amazon. Yeah,
this is something that when you mentioned it actually before the cast, I looked at it and I thought it would be something that I wanted to read. I actually wanted to try and get like a PDF version of it before the cast to try and blast through it before the cast, so I'd be able to say that I'd read it, but unfortunately I couldn't get that because obviously it's physical only, which is kind of cool in this day and age actually, that it is physical only. I like that. And
which was also weird because that's not how it started. I think it started online.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
So I think I will. I'll be picking that up from Amazon as well. Definitely.
Yeah. One thing I'll just add: it does like a really interesting thing with how it's written. Like it's written with a sort of a mix of like net speak, where like purposefully like the start of sentences aren't always capitals, and you have the odd typo in there. And I kind of at first I thought, oh wow, like how there's a spelling mistake here. But then the more I'm reading through it, it's like the intent there is really cool because it does feel like this super direct thing that this webcomic or this like forum post that has now been given art, and it's cool and immediate, and it's not like it doesn't bash you over the head. It isn't actual like text speak, but it has this very sort of like what's the word, like familiar, just sort of casual tone to it, and it makes it quite an easy read.
Like somebody sending you a text message or an email, or maybe
more like long form, like a forum post.
Yeah, someone replying to something you've said on Reddit or something like that.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that sounds like a really good read, and it is something that I will want to pick up. And upon reading, because I've read that first page, which you mentioned, the coffee shop scenario. That's the page that I read, because that's the page that's kind of available as a preview.
That comes up on Google Images when you search for it.
Yeah, that's I've read that first page, and I want to read the rest of it now. So yeah, it does sound pretty cool, like a good read. I guess we move on to you, Ray.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna try not to spend too much time on these. I'm trying to blast through them because I know we're getting on a bit. But for the Black Friday sale on Comixology, I picked up a bunch of just different cheap volumes and whatnot. So one of these was called Blank Slate, which is by a writer called Boulet. I think that's his or her pen name. And the art is by Penelope Bagieux. And so this is a comic from March 2016. It's about a girl who wakes up on a bench in Paris with no memory of where she is, how she got there, or who she is herself. So we kind of follow her as she traces her steps through the city of Paris, trying to understand how she got to this place, what's been happening to her. She kind of wakes up on this bench with tears in her eyes, wondering, has she been crying, with no memory of it. And what I really liked about this comic is that it spends a lot of time focusing on the minutiae of dealing with this affliction that she's got, and it is somewhat of a Hollywood type of amnesia in that she can remember how to function. She can remember how to navigate the city and social structures and whatnot, but she just can't remember her name or her address and personal details like that. And so we see her struggle with the thought process of how to locate and enter her apartment, for example, without looking suspicious. Another one is that it takes her like half the book to get into her laptop because she has no recollection of the password. And one of the things I love is that we get these extended scenes of her going over these potential scenarios in her head. So, for example, an early one, as she's about to enter her apartment, she's got the key in the lock and she's about to turn it, and we get 4 panels, so the page is cut up into four blocks of her opening the door and seeing, various scenes that could potentially be the case. So, we see her entering the room onto a scared stranger. She's entered somebody else's apartment, or there's a dead body on the floor with her name written on the wall, or a surprise birthday party, or, some mysterious figures waiting to chloroform her and take her away. And then you flip the page, and then there's 4 more. And you flip the page, and there's 4 more of them. Like some of these flights of fantasy, or her wild imagination running off, have these really extended sequences, and it's really clever. Like there's a lot of imagination put into this. It's really creative, and like it's a terrifying look into the mindset of someone who would be this dislocated from herself because of what she's going through. And so from the start of the book, like literally from the very first few pages, we get this sense that despite not knowing herself, she doesn't really like herself, or rather the version of herself that she used to be. So one of the things that is really well presented, really like a really deft touch, is that she keeps blowing the fringe out of her hair. Like it's obviously this thing that the person she used to be before she lost her memory would have made the decision to have that fringe haircut, but the person she is now finds it extremely frustrating, and every few panels she's like blowing it out of her hair. So it carries on with her discovering more about herself and the life that she used to have and the friends that she used to have and what she's made of her life. And I don't want to spoil it, so I'm going to stop there. But it all kind of builds into this really sweet and satisfying conclusion. And I think you guys should check it out. I haven't talked about the artwork. It's very pretty. It's really like simple, wobbly line drawings where everything's kind of a little bit scribbly, but everyone's really realistically proportioned. And the characters and the settings are really expressive. Like you really get this sense of Paris from them. And one of the things I like about the art is how simple the scribbles are, but they give way to like really subtle but telling body language. Like you get these, you get to see between the different panels the way she shrugs her shoulders, or the way that she's touching her hair or playing with her hair and stuff like that. I don't know, I just think it's really special.
It's very abstract, would you say?
Kind of. I mean, the art style is kind of abstract, but it allows for this like really deft touch in like her body language and how she's slightly uncomfortable in herself. And I think that's one of the main themes of the journey, is trying to find who she's trying to find out who she is and who she was and what that means for her now, and trying to regain her memory, the struggle she goes through to get her memory back. And it's all very down to earth. There's nothing that fantastical about it, but yeah, I think honestly, if you're going to pick it up for just anything, it's worth it for the daydream sequences. I don't want to give too much away about where they go, but there's some really clever stuff going on there. So yeah, that was Blank Slate by writer Boulet and art by Penelope Bagieux. And then the next thing that I picked up was called Maxwell's Demons. Right, so this is art by Denise Camp and art and cover art by Vittorio Astone. I literally just read this before we started recording, so I haven't really had much time to let it gestate. So I think I might save my full impression for next month when issue 2 is hopefully out, and hopefully you guys, may have picked it up as well. So the thing that sold me on it was that it's by Vault Comics, who's a publishing company that I've been quite impressed with lately. Where I think they also did Spiritus, which I liked, and I need to catch up with everything after issue 1. But also that it was penned as being... It has lots of comparisons to Sandman, and having read it, I think the comparisons are pretty apt, both visually and narratively. So it's all about this young kid who doesn't have the happiest home life. We see his dad being pretty cruel to him, and he escapes into his fantasy land where he's playing with his toys. And he's basically he's very similar in some ways to the character of Dream of the Endless, in that he's a shaper. We see him diving into his fantasy, and it may or may not be real. It's not really given away that strictly in this first issue, but he's weaving his way through his own stories, and there's genuine threat. I feel, whether it's real or not, it feels very threatening, and it's just him jumping at the call to be something more within his own mind. I really liked it. I'm gonna carry on to issue number 2. A big part of this is the structure, where it ends. It feels like it should have ended, and then it has an epilogue which carries on for like another 5 or 6 pages, and we kind of get a revised version of his relationship with his dad, and it's doing some interesting things. I think, like I said, I'd like to give it until the second one before I give a deeper analysis of it. But that's Maxwell's Demons number 1 by Denise Camp and Vittorio Astone.
That is something that sounds very interesting, and something that I'll probably definitely pick up and read.
Yeah, I think you dig it. I think you dig the art style as well. It does have this like soft, dreamlike thing. Like it's fresh off the top of my head, so I don't really have the language to describe it. But go check it out. Do some Google image searching, see if it's for you. Yeah, no, definitely. One last one on your list, wasn't there? Oh yes, James Bond, Moneypenny. I think I might have brought this up quite a few months back. It's something that I saw on the new releases, and I was like, I'll add it to my pull list, and then I couldn't find it in comic book shops. I'm really glad I didn't. I hated it. It feels like a really cheap cash in. I think it maybe have been when Spectre came out. I don't know. It was a waste of 99 pence. I'm glad I didn't buy the floppy. Yeah. I'm not going to explain why. I just didn't like it. So, one thing that I didn't, it's not on the list of things that I wanted to talk about, but it's just, again, another thing that I watched literally minutes before we started recording. The Nerd Writer, who is one of my favorite YouTube essayists, and I believe Leon's a big fan of his as well. He just released yesterday a new video called How to Design a Comic Book Page. And it's basically a 6-minute essay picking apart one of his favorite pages from Art Spiegelman's Mouse, who we all know is like one of the most influential comic books in recent history, depicting Art Spiegelman's conversations with his dad about his dad's time in Auschwitz as a prisoner. And it's just a really interesting look into the kind of thing we were talking about when we discussed The Beautiful Death, about this consideration for panel structure and panel flow, and how you can have some an elevated understanding of the art. And if you have even a passing interest in how comics are constructed, I would check this out. It's a good intro to this kind of thing. So I'll leave a link in the show notes for that, but that's Nerd Writer 1, How to Design a Comic Book Page. What we're going to do is we're going to skip the rundown of what we're looking forward to, because you can hit up Previews World and you'll be able to find everything that's coming out next week on there, and there's some interesting stuff coming, but we're going to skip straight to questions today. So questions then. So our question today is from basically the Great Devourer is sort of in the galactic neighborhood, and his herald swung by. Nice chap, very shiny.
He decided to pose a question for Ace Comicals, and he said, if you could fall into a swimming pool full of something, Scrooge McDuck style, so like when Scrooge McDuck dives into his money pit, what would it be and why?
Why don't you go first, Greg?
Oh. What would I fall into? Well,
what's your favourite thing in the world, Greg?
It could be.
What have you started a podcast?
Okay, comic books. Then there you go. A pool of comic books, and probably come out with loads of paper cuts if I don't die of blunt force trauma when I hit the pile of books.
Well, we were discussing this the other day, and my idea was if you aerate the pool, then you could dive into it without having blunt force trauma with from the impact of hitting what is essentially solid ground, because all the paper would have been compacted. If you aerate it, it'll be nice and soft, and you'll dive in, but then you die from 1,000 paper cuts. So it's not good either way, really.
Yeah. No, but like, what about displacement? So if I'm diving into it, am I not displacing the air and compacting the comics anyway?
I mean, whatever's beneath you, I guess. But if you have enough aeration from underneath, then you sink to the bottom and find it really hard to get out. Maybe. Also,
there's the whole thing. Like, I'm no physicist, but like when you hit water from a great height, and it hurts, and if you hit water hard enough from a high enough height, you'll probably just like splat like you would hitting concrete.
Yeah, from surface tension and whatnot. But again, with these deep dives that people do into standing water, they do have bubble jets underneath to quote unquote soften the water, and that makes it survivable.
Okay,
and you can do that without getting too harmed. Yeah,
cool. Right. So I guess I'd be safe to jump into a pool of comic books. It's well thought. As long as Ray designs my comic book pool room, then it's fine.
And you're immune to paper cuts.
Yeah.
Or you dive into really soft paper, but then you'd be ruining all your comics. Like I
wouldn't use my comics. I wouldn't use my comics.
Oh, fair enough. All right then, stay away from my comics, Greg.
If I was rich enough to have a room like that, I'd buy comics purely to fuel that room. I'd buy copies of James Bond Moneypenny.
What a way to go. It'd be a terrible way to go, surrounded by the worst of the thing that you love.
So Ray, what would you have? What would your room be?
I don't know. I didn't have much time to think about this. Like, the thing that I love the most, or one of the things I love the most that I feel would be survivable, yogurt maybe. Like, and if I did drown in it, like, at least I would be comfortable, because it would be quite soothing, and my skin would be great when they fish me out. Or on the flip side, I like collecting pens, so maybe like fountain pens and ballpoint pens, but that would hurt. So I don't think I want that either. This is a horrible question. Who thought of it?
Aerated fountain pens.
That's no.
No, but like what I've got this image of now. When you said yogurt, you remember like the old fromage frais thing, like the Munch Bunch, like the fruit characters.
Right.
Did you ever see those adverts when you were a kid?
I vaguely recall it.
Yeah, there's like these little. I swear they had these little fruit characters. I'm probably making this up. This is probably one of those like memories that isn't actually a memory, or I don't know. But like I'm just got this image of these like cartoon fruits like murdering you by dropping you into a pool of yogurt, and you like desperately trying to climb out and them kicking you back in again and things.
I mean, there's worse ways to go, Greg.
So yeah, Leon, you got an answer to this one?
I mean, not really, but but what I would say though is that my pool that I would do my Scrooge McDuck dive in would have it's a big recipe. So you've got some radioactive spiders in there. You've got lots of money and gadgets. You've got sort of the atom testing, which led to early radiation. The early mutation that's packed in there somewhere. You've just got this whole concoction full of radioactive spiders, and I'm just going to dive in it because, like, when I leave it, I'll have a power, surely. Like, there's a bit of like yellow, red sun energy as well. Like, and I'll just dive in it. I'll leave with one power. I mean, worst case scenario, I'll die or become like a Morlock. Best case scenario, I could be Jean Grey. So Jean Grey who can web sling. So
I think
who knows?
You'll dive into it and come out the other end as an ashen skeleton.
You don't know. I could go through the cosmos.
I mean,
come out the other side.
You could get one great superpower, but then come out with like 1,000 ailments as well.
A Pool of the Power Cosmic would be a pretty good one, because you'd come out as the Silver Surfer.
I don't know. That's annoying.
You'd be cold all the time.
He doesn't feel
You read
cold.
Curse Words 1. That's not going to end well. No, like, yeah, you just got to go ham. Like, just fill it with bats. Like, just pour everything in there. Make it a big, giant, like melting pot of just all these origin things. Put some like.
So you've got this pool of spiders, and then you're layering like gadgets and bats and thing on top of that. So then you've got a load of dead radioactive spiders because they're getting squished. And
no, they're not getting squished.
You're gonna have like a bat sandwich going on as well, because all these like dead bats crawling around on top of each other, like half broken and whatever. And then like that just sounds horrific.
No, guys, look. Leon, you're my friend. I feel like I know you really well. If I had a pool for you to dive into, it would be full of copies of Suicide Squad, DVD copies of Suicide Squad, DVD copies of the theatrical cut of Suicide Squad. See how well
it'd be his favourite kind of cut. It would be like cam quality rips of Suicide Squad.
I'm fucking out of here.
Oh, Leon's gone. I think it's time to wrap up, Greg.
Yeah. So that has brought us to a close. So that has been episode 23 of Ace Comicals. You can find us on Facebook under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Twitter at Ace Comicals. You can find us on WordPress at acecomicals.wordpress.com. You can find us on all manner of podcasting apps and places, because Rahul has done some arcane magic and got us everywhere, basically. So you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on... You know more than me about this, Ray, so...
Yeah, Stitcher, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, a bunch of these other ones. The only one that we're struggling with right now is Google Play, I believe, but you don't want to go there because they don't let us Brits on there. So, download it from somewhere else. It's
not available in our neck of the woods yet, so we're not on there yet. Yeah. But yeah, we're pretty much available everywhere. You can find me on Twitter under @Bato. If you want to pose us a question for our next episode, then please write to us at acecomicals.gmail.com, or you can write to us via Facebook or Twitter, and we will answer your question on our next episode. Ray, where can we find you?
Yeah, best place would be Twitter at Monkeh, so that's at MOONKEH.
And Leon, where can we find you?
You can find me doing the breaststroke in my pool of Suicide Squad DVDs at Leon Everett.
That has been Ace Comicals episode 23. Thanks for listening, guys. Ace Comicals, over and out.